It's not something you hear every day, is it? Criminal gangs being labeled the same way as like international terrorist groups.
No, it's definitely a striking move, and it really brings up this idea of convergence, or maybe how the U.S. government sees a convergence between these groups.
Right. We're talking about the Trump administration's decision designating two Haitian gangs, Ansanm and Grif, as foreign terrorist organizations. That's a big label.
It absolutely is. It's not just semantics. Broadly, it means the U.S. views them as a threat on par with, say, al-Qaeda or ISIS, and that kicks off a whole specific set of legal and policy actions.
Exactly. So to really, get into this, we've been looking closely at an article from Al Jazeera.
A very insightful piece.
Yeah, and our mission for this deep dive is basically to unpack why this happened, what the potential effects, the fallout might be, and what it signals about Haiti, obviously, but also maybe U.S. policy towards Latin America more generally.
And it's crucial to see this isn't happening in isolation, right? The Al Jazeera article points out this is kind of a trend.
Oh, yeah.
Well, back in February, the same administration designated 8 other groups in the region. We're talking MS-13, Tren de Agua, some Mexican cartels.
Ah, right. I remember that. So this is definitely part of a bigger strategy, it seems.
Seems so. But it also bumps up against that distinction experts usually make, the difference between criminal gangs who are mostly after money.
Yeah, economic motives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Versus traditional terrorist groups who have, clearer political or ideological aims. The article touches on that tension.
Yeah, that's a key point. So what was the official reason given for these gangs, Ansanm and Grif?
Well, Secretary of State Marco Rubio laid it out. Basically, they've spread massive violence and chaos. They control huge chunks of Port-au-Prince.
Huge chunks is putting it mildly, from what I've read.
Right. And the argument is that this situation directly threatens U.S. national security interests there in the region.
Okay. That framing national security threat that seems to fit with this administration's, let's say, harder line on crime in Latin America generally.
It does. They seem to be framing these groups less as just criminals needing law enforcement and more as destabilizing forces that threaten the U.S. itself. Think migration, drug flows.
So it becomes a security issue, maybe requiring a more assertive response than just cooperation?
Potentially, yes. It feels like a shift toward seeing it as a direct threat needing maybe even unilateral action, which is, well, different from some past approaches focusing more on partnership.
Okay, so they've got the label. What does that mean, like, practically? What changes immediately?
Well, legally, 2 main things jump out. First, members of these gangs. Barred from entering the U.S., inadmissible.
Okay, makes sense.
Second, and this is maybe more complex, it's now illegal for anyone in the U.S. or any U.S. person to knowingly provide material support or resources to them.
Material support. That sounds potentially very broad. What could that actually cover on the ground in Haiti?
It is broad. And that's where you get these really serious concerns about unintended consequences, especially for, like, humanitarian aid.
Ah.
The article quotes Romain Lecour. He's with the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime. He's worried this could really mess up humanitarian and international cooperation.
How so?
Well, his fear is they could literally stop aid getting to people who are starving. Is giving food or medicine in an area controlled by Ansanm now considered material support? It's a dangerous gray area.
That's a huge problem because these gangs, they control so much territory, don't they?
Exactly. Ansanm reports suggest controls maybe up to 85% of Port-au-Prince. 85%.
Wow.
So they already control movement, they charge tolls, they tax goods. Now add this designation. Jake Johnston from CPR, the Center for Economic and Policy Research, he suggests this could create a de facto embargo.
A de facto embargo meaning?
Meaning almost any economic activity, any movement of essential supplies could now carry this risk of violating U.S. anti-terrorism law. You could just choke things off.
So the goal might be to hurt the gangs, but the reality could be hurting the entire population even more, worsening an already desperate situation.
Precisely. And the situation is desperate. The Al Jazeera piece reminds us, the UN says 5.7 million Haitians face hunger, over 1 million displaced by violence. It's catastrophic.
Yeah, those numbers are just staggering. It really makes you pause and think about the ripple effects of these kinds of decisions.
Absolutely. You aim at one target, but the shockwaves can hit everyone.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit. This designation, as you said, fits into this bigger picture of U.S. policy in the region under Trump.
Right.
The article mentions, past talk from Trump, other Republicans about potentially even military strikes in places like Mexico against cartels.
Yes, and that kind of talk always raises serious red flags about sovereignty down there, understandably.
And does this approach, designating groups as terrorists, actually help cooperation with countries like Mexico? Or does it maybe hinder it?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? The article suggests it could undermine cooperation. If partners feel like the U.S. is acting unilaterally or aggressively, are they going to be more willing to work together on these really complex transnational crime issues or less?
Good point. And what about U.S. involvement in Haiti itself? Has that changed?
It seems like it. The article suggests maybe a reduction in direct U.S. efforts to tackle the violence on the ground.
Yeah.
This designation is a strong statement, but maybe less hands-on engagement.
Interesting. What about that international security mission, the one led by Kenya?
Ah, yes. The UN-backed mission. It's heavily reliant on U.S. support money, logistics. But the article notes some of that funding has reportedly been frozen or held up by the Trump administration.
And that mission's already facing huge challenges, right? I remember reading about a Kenyan police officer being killed back in February.
Yes, tragically. It just highlights how incredibly dangerous and difficult the environment is. And honestly, given Haiti's history with foreign interventions, there's a lot of skepticism about whether any outside force can really stabilize things long term, given how deep the problems run, the political instability, the power of these gangs.
And there's another layer here, too, isn't there? The administration's stance on Haitians already in the U.S., like TPS.
Right, temporary protected status. The article points out the administration has been trying to end TPS and also humanitarian parole for Haitians.
How many people are we talking about under PPS?
Over 500,000, according to the piece. 520,694, I think it said. And the plan mentioned was termination by August.
Wow. So designate gangs as terrorists back home and simultaneously move to end protections for Haitians here.
Taken together, yeah, paints a picture. It looks like a more restrictive, maybe less supportive approach overall towards Haiti and its diaspora in the U.S. You have to wonder about the long-term strategy.
And all this is happening while the gangs in Haiti just get stronger.
Especially since President Moïse's assassination in 2021. That created a massive power vacuum. Public trust in the government, whatever was left of it, just crumbled.
Giving the gangs the opening they needed.
Exactly. They stepped in, consolidated power, and again, those humanitarian numbers the article cites, the million-plus displaced, the nearly 6 million hungry. That's the brutal reality this is all playing out against.
Okay, so let's try and pull the threads together here. We've got the U.S. designating these two major Haitian gangs as foreign terrorists.
Right. Extending that strategy we've seen applied elsewhere in Latin America.
The stated aim is tackling violence, protecting U.S. interests. But there are huge question marks about the impact on humanitarian aid.
Potentially creating that de facto embargo.
And worsening the already terrible conditions for ordinary Haitians. All this fits into a broader, kind of hardline U.S. policy.
Focused on security threats like migration and drugs, maybe less on direct engagement or cooperation.
And we see shifts in on-the-ground involvement in Haiti, questions around the international mission support, plus moves to limit protections for Haitians in the U.S.
All while Haiti itself is just overwhelmed by gang control, political breakdown, and this devastating humanitarian crisis.
So it really leaves you with a heavy question, doesn't it? When you look at this whole complex mess of the gangs, the politics, the history of intervention, the sheer human suffering, what will the long-term impact of this specific action, this terrorist label, actually be for Haiti, for the region? Is it, a genuinely helpful new tool? Or does it risk just pushing an incredibly vulnerable population further into isolation and, well, harm?
That's the critical question to ponder, I think.
Right.
Does this approach help, or does it inadvertently deepen the crisis for the very people caught in the middle?